Rain hammered the glass towers of Seoul as Esh ran through the storm, heels slipping on wet pavement, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. She didn't see the black car until its headlights swallowed her whole, didn't see the man who threw himself from the driver's seat and caught her a heartbeat before the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, she was staring into a face carved from moonlight and danger, sharp jaw, storm gray eyes, a scar tracing his temple like a secret he refused to explain. He held her like she weighed nothing, like she mattered. "Safe," he said, voice low as thunder rolling over water. She didn't know yet that he was Seo Jun-hyuk, heir to an empire, a man the tabloids called ice and untouchable. She didn't know that something in his chest, long frozen, had just cracked wide open the moment her hand closed around his coat. Neither of them knew that this collision, this single reckless second in the rain, would rewrite both their lives. Welcome to Afro Soul Stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and rain still clinging to Esh's damp hair. She blinked awake to fluorescent light and the unmistakable weight of someone watching her. He sat in the corner chair, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tie loosened like he'd forgotten it existed. Jun-hyuk hadn't left, not once in 6 hours. "You should be resting," she rasped. "The one in the hospital bed," he said, and something almost like a smile ghosted his mouth before vanishing. She didn't know who he was. She only knew a stranger had thrown himself into traffic to save her life, and now he sat there like he had nowhere else in the world to be. The next day, a nurse let it slip. The Seo Jun-hyuk, CEO of Seo Dynamics, third richest man in South Korea, had personally paid for a private wing so Esh could recover in peace. Esh stared at the ceiling, stunned. Men like that didn't linger in hospital rooms for strangers, but Jun-hyuk wasn't a man who did anything by half measures. Not when it came to things or people he decided were his to protect. A few days later, Esh was discharged into a Seoul she barely recognized, a black car waiting, a driver holding an umbrella, and Jun-hyuk himself standing in the rain like he'd been born to weather storms for other people. "I can take a cab," she said, startled. "You can," he agreed. "But you won't." It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. And despite herself, Esh felt her resistance crack like ice under sun. She learned quickly that Jun-hyuk's world ran on precision and control. Glass offices, silent boardrooms, men who flinched when he entered a room. But alone with her, something in him softened, unspooled, became almost boyish in his attentiveness. He noticed she skipped lunch during interviews for a design position, and an hour later, a courier arrived with her favorite Nigerian jollof rice from a restaurant 3 districts away. He never explained how he knew. He simply watched her eat with quiet satisfaction, like feeding her mattered more than any merger he'd closed that morning. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted to," he said simply, and the words landed harder than they should have. By the end of the week, Esh had a job at Seo Dynamics Design Division, earned, not given, though she suspected his fingerprints were somewhere on the decision. She told herself she'd keep her distance. Professional. Grateful, but distant. That plan lasted exactly until the office holiday gathering, where a junior executive named Min-ho leaned too close, laughed too easily, let his hand rest too long on her arm. Across the room, Jun-hyuk's jaw tightened. His glass stilled halfway to his lips. He said nothing. He never had to say anything, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and Min-ho found urgent business elsewhere within the minute. Esh caught the tail end of it and felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. "You didn't like that," she said later, cornering him by the elevators, testing. "I don't like a lot of things," Jun-hyuk said, eyes dark. "I didn't say anything. You didn't have to." A long moment, neither moved. The air between them crackled, thick with things neither had said aloud. Then he stepped back, jaw tight, controls snapping back into place like armor. "Good night, Esh." She watched him walk away and wondered why her heart was pounding like she'd just survived something. The weeks that followed blurred into stolen moments. Him showing up at her apartment with an umbrella before she even checked the weather. Him remembering she took her coffee with too much cream. Him standing just a little too close in elevators. His hand hovering at the small of her back like he was memorizing the shape of her. Esh told herself it was nothing. She told herself a lot of things that weren't true. Then came the gala. Seo Dynamics' annual charity event glittered with crystal and old money, and Esh arrived in emerald silk that made Jun-hyuk forget, briefly, how to breathe. He crossed the room toward her like the rest of the guests didn't exist. "You look," he started and stopped, uncharacteristically wordless. Careful, Mr. Seo, she teased. You almost said something nice. Say a lot of things, he murmured, voice dropping. Just not to people who matter as little as everyone else in this room. Implication hung between them, heavy and electric. She matters more. But the night soured fast. A rival conglomerate's heir, Park Sung-min, cornered Esh near the terrace, his charm oily and his hands too familiar. When Jun Hyuk found them, his expression was glacial, the kind of calm that terrified men who knew him. She's not interested, Jun Hyuk said, voice quiet enough to be lethal. Didn't realize the Ice King had a type, Sung-min sneered. Didn't know it was. He glanced at Esh with cruel amusement, and the unspoken slur hung poisonous in the air. Something in Jun Hyuk went very still. Finish that sentence, he said softly, and see what happens. Sung-min didn't finish it. He left. Esh found Jun Hyuk on the terrace afterward, staring out at the glittering skyline, hands braced on the railing like he was holding himself back from something. Thank you, she said quietly. For all of it. Don't want your thanks. He turned, and for the first time his walls weren't just cracked, they were gone. I want to know why every time someone looks at you wrong, I want to burn the world down. I want to know why I can't sleep unless I know you're safe. I want to know why you've undone 8 years of me not feeling anything at all. Rain began to fall, soft and sudden, catching in her lashes, his hair. Jun Hyuk, tell me to stop, he said, closing the distance between them, and I will. She didn't tell him to stop. The kiss, when it finally came, was slow and inevitable, like something that had been writing itself since the night he pulled her from the rain. Esh's fingers curled into his lapels. His hand cradled her jaw like she was something rare and breakable and entirely his to cherish. The city lights blurred around them. For the first time in years, Jun Hyuk felt something other than control. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, he whispered against her lips, I've been waiting my whole life to feel like this. Neither of them noticed the flash of a camera from the shadows below the terrace. The next morning, chaos. SEO Dynamics CEO's secret lover. Who is she? The headline screamed across every entertainment site in South Korea, a grainy photo of the kiss beneath it. Esh's phone exploded with messages, some cruel, some curious, all suffocating. Jun Hyuk arrived at her apartment within the hour, fury simmering beneath his composure. I'll handle this, he said. I'll issue a statement. I'll handle it how? Esh's voice cracked. By making me a headline, a scandal. Do you know what people are saying about me, about why a man like you would want someone like me? I don't care what they say. Her eyes burned. I've spent my whole life being underestimated, being watched, being the outsider. And now the whole country is deciding who I am before I get to. That evening, at a press conference Jun Hyuk hadn't sanctioned, his father, chairman of SEO Dynamics board, addressed the scandal himself, calling Esh an inappropriate distraction, and hinting the company would reassess her position in the design division. Esh watched the broadcast alone, hands shaking, humiliation and heartbreak tangled together. She didn't wait for Jun Hyuk to explain. She packed a bag that night and left before dawn, leaving only a note. I won't be the reason your world falls apart. Forget me. Jun Hyuk found the note at sunrise. He read it twice, 3 times, his hands trembling with something that wasn't quite rage and wasn't quite grief. Then he called his father's office and in a voice colder than anyone had ever heard from him, said 4 words. You're finished here. By noon, CEO Jun Hyuk had removed his father from operational control of SEO Dynamics, a boardroom coup 8 years in the making, triggered in a single furious morning. He didn't do it for the company. He did it because the man who raised him had tried to erase the one person who made him feel human. He searched for Esh for 3 days, her apartment empty, her phone disconnected, her friends tight-lipped and protective. He canceled meetings, ignored calls from shareholders, sat in his car outside her old design studio until security asked him to leave. On the 4th night, a tip from a courier, she'd been spotted at a small cafe near Hongdae, the kind of place that served instant noodles and didn't care who you used to work for. He found her there, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, staring into a cup of tea gone cold. You found me, she said, not looking up. I'll always find you. He sat across from her, and for once the untouchable CEO looked simply, achingly human. I removed my father from the company. I gave a statement. I told the truth that I love you, that I've never meant anything more in my life. Come home, Esh, not to my penthouse, to me. Her eyes filled. You did all that. I'd do it 1,000 times over. But their reunion was short-lived. 2 nights later, as Esh left the design studio alone, a black van pulled up beside her. Before she could scream, a hand closed over her mouth and the world went dark. Jun Hyuk received the call at 11:47 p.m., a distorted voice, a ransom demand disguised as revenge. His father's associates, furious at being ousted, had taken the one thing that could break him. 50 million won, the voice said. Wire it by midnight or she disappears. Jun Hyuk didn't argue, didn't negotiate. I'll bring it myself, he said, voice a blade wrapped in silk. And when I find you, you'll wish you'd asked for more. He didn't wait for police, didn't wait for his security team to finish tracing the signal. Jun Hyuk drove through Seoul's underbelly himself, calling in favors from men his father never knew he kept close, old contacts, quiet debts. The kind of allies a man builds when he's spent his life preparing for war he hoped he'd never fight. By 2 a.m., he had a location, an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Esh woke bound to a chair, her shoulder throbbing, panic clawing up her throat. 2 men argued in the corner about money, about timing, about a plan already unraveling. She thought of Jun Hyuk, his hands, his voice, the way he'd promised I'll always find you, and forced herself to breathe. He's coming, she told herself. He's coming. He came. Jun Hyuk arrived alone, unarmed, his composure a weapon sharper than any blade. Let her go, he said, stepping into the warehouse light, and I'll forget every name in this room. Don't, and I promise you'll spend the rest of your lives regretting it. Kidnappers laughed, until police sirens screamed in the distance, until Jun Hyuk's private security swarmed the perimeter, until they realized the man in front of them had never once been bluffing. In the chaos, Jun Hyuk crossed the room, tore through the ropes binding Esh's wrists, and pulled her into his chest like he could shield her from the world with his body alone. Got you, he breathed into her hair, hands shaking for the first time in years. I've got you, you're safe. She sobbed against him, clutching his shirt, and for a moment the danger, the scandal, the whole cruel city outside seemed to fall away. The warehouse lights spun red and blue as police cuffed the men who'd taken her. Esh sat wrapped in a blanket on the back of an ambulance, hands still trembling, while Jun Hyuk crouched in front of her, refusing to let go of her hand even as paramedics checked her pulse. I thought I'd lost you, he said, voice raw in a way she'd never heard from him. I've built an empire out of never needing anyone, and then you walked into my life in the rain, and I realized none of it means anything if you're not in it. Jun Hyuk, marry me. The words left him before he could stop them, fierce and certain. Not because of tonight, not because I'm afraid of losing you again, because I've never wanted anything the way I want a life with you. Esh laughed through tears, disbelieving. You're proposing at a crime scene. Propose anywhere, he said, as long as it ends with you saying yes. She cupped his scarred face in both hands. Yes, God, yes. Following morning, Seoul woke to 2 headlines. The arrest of a conspiracy against Seoul Dynamics ousted former chairman, and a single photo, Jun Hyuk kneeling beside an ambulance, forehead pressed to Esh's, both of them smiling through exhaustion and relief. The narrative the tabloids had tried to write for them dissolved overnight, replaced by something the public hadn't expected, a love story too real to mock. By the end of that month, Jun Hyuk had restructured the company's leadership, publicly and formally, standing before the board to introduce Esh not as a scandal, but as his fiancée, a woman, he said, who had taught him more about strength and grace than a lifetime in boardrooms ever had. His mother, long estranged from her husband's cold ambitions, embraced Esh like the daughter she'd always wanted. The world that once tried to shrink Esh down now made room for her, because Jun Hyuk had made it clear there was no version of his future that didn't include her. Their wedding took place in early spring, beneath cherry blossoms scattering like confetti across a private garden overlooking the Han River. Esh wore ivory lace with West African beadwork stitched into the hem, a quiet, beautiful merging of 2 worlds neither of them had expected to share. Jun Hyuk, usually so composed, couldn't stop the tremor in his hands as she walked toward him. You saved me, he murmured as she reached him. Long before I ever saved you. Saved each other, she whispered back. A year later, in a penthouse that had once felt like glass and ice, laughter now filled every room. Esh sat curled against Jun Hyuk on their balcony, his hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her stomach, the city lights glittering below like the same rain-soaked skyline where it had all begun. Do you regret it? She teased softly. Falling for the girl you almost hit with your car. He pressed a kiss to her temple, voice thick with quiet devotion. "It's the only thing I've ever done right." Outside, Seoul glittered on, indifferent to the empire he'd built or the fortune he commanded, because none of it had ever mattered as much as the woman asleep in his arms, and the family they were building together, one impossible, beautiful risk at a time.